Before viewing video lessons, it is important to read the textbook using the learning guide as your turn-by-turn directions. Then use the learning guide to take organized notes in your own words with examples and pictures. This video continues Human Memory, Chapter 7. In the previous videos, we talked about the model for human memory, and we talked about how the sensory input is translated into sensory memory. If we pay attention to it, it moves to short-term memory. If we work on it in working memory and encode it well, it then moves to long-term memory, where we are able to retrieve it. Now I want to take just a minute to talk about the biology or physiology of those memories that are stored. So if we look at the physiology of memory, we know that the hippocampus and the medial temporal lobes help play a role in consolidating our memories. This is particularly true for declarative memories or memories that you can verbalize or put words to. The temporal lobe is the same lobe that processes speech and language. So it's the part of the brain that's going to translate our experiences into words that have meaning to us. Now, when you create a memory in long-term memory, what you're actually doing is changing a small portion of the neural circuitry in the cortex. That's where those memories are biologically stored. So what happens is you change the excitability of a set of neurons in the network. You may change the neurotransmitters in the synapses between those neurons. And you can even trigger the development of growth in the neurons. This is called neurogenesis. So you can actually cause neurons to grow and reach out to one another. You can make the dendrites and the axons reach out and create a very dense connection. So when it comes to the physiology of memory, the nervous system tissue is kind of like muscle tissue. You have to use it or you lose it. And to maintain the neural circuits that you create when you study in your classes, you need to exercise them. And the number one exercise tool for memory is retrieval. So studying by using retrieval-based study strategies, quizzing yourself, doing flashcards, studying with a partner, is going to exercise those memories and maintain the biology that stores them. If we don't exercise, then those unused circuits are going to get pruned and we're going to forget information. So if you don't quiz yourself, if you don't use those retrieval-based study strategies, you're going to lose those memories. Because memory is stored biologically, it's also really important that you take care of those neurons and the brain. And we'll talk about that more in the next section. So now we're going to focus on things that you can do to improve your memory of just everyday life events, to include this class. So we've really got to take good care of our neurons and our brain. And so I have a list of good neurological health habits. These are kind of like good dental health habits. You do these things to maintain the health of your neurons. The number one thing is adequate sleep. As you learned in Chapter 5, Variations in Consciousness, sleep is critical to attention and focus and memory and problem solving. You also need physical activity. Lots of research has looked at college students who exercise versus college students who don't exercise, and all other things being equal, college students who exercise get better grades and graduate more frequently than sedentary students. It's also really important to learn how to manage stress and give yourself relaxation time to maintain good neurological health. As you'll learn later on in the semester when we do the chapter on stress, which is chapter 13. No, I think 13. Yeah, chapter 13. Stress is very damaging to the brain, and in particular, it inhibits neurogenesis in the hippocampus, which is a really important brain structure for learning and memory. So stress management is key to good neurological health and memory. You also need to avoid exposing your nervous system to toxins. Toxins include things like alcohol, and from head injuries, from physically injuring that tissue. Finally, to take care of your brain, you need to eat a balanced diet. Now, it turns out that there isn't really a special diet just for your brain. The same healthy eating habits that are good for other parts of your body, like your heart, are also good for your brain. So a balanced diet needs to include healthy fats. Fat is really important in the brain because it's part of the insulating material on the axons. The myelin sheath is made of fats. So we need fats, but they should be healthy fats, like omega-3s and omega-6s. Things like the types of fats you find in nuts and fish, those sorts of things. We also need protein. A lot of the structure on a cellular level in our body is made up of protein, and that includes the structure of the nervous system. We need carbohydrates. They're excellent sources of energy, but complex carbohydrates are much better for our neurons than are the more simple sugars or refined products. And then fruits and vegetables are very important because they contain the important vitamins and minerals that are also needed for good neurological health. Another thing that's really important is to eat at regular intervals throughout the day. So I have some fun facts to help explain why that's important. So your brain is about 2% of your total body weight, but uses about 20% of your calories. And so what that means is that your brain is constantly working and constantly using up calories. If you're skipping meals, then your brain is going to lag a little bit. It's going to lack the energy it needs to do the work that you want it to do. And it does need that energy. But the brain is one of the most efficient machines on the planet. So your brain runs on about 12 watts of power. So that's less power than a light bulb needs to run. If you look at the smartest computer that we've been able to create, that's IBM's Watson supercomputer that defeated the Jeopardy champions. Watson needs 90,000 watts of power to do that. Think about what our brain does with such little power. So our final topic here are just a quick summary of things that you can do to avoid forgetting. And these should be things that feel like a repetition of lessons you've been learning about good study habits since the beginning of the semester. It's really important to do distributed practice. What this means is you shouldn't try to cram everything into your head right before the test. So one way that we oftentimes refer to this is spaced practice with interleaving. What that means is you should study in 15 to 20 minute chunks, focusing on one key idea for 15 to 20 minutes until mastery, taking a little break, and then focusing on a new topic. If we look at performance, spaced practice is superior throughout our assessment period. If you think about this class and what you learned at the beginning of the semester and what you get tested on at midterm, that's going to be the best way for you to learn and remember in this class. You also want to minimize interference and distractions to help focus your attention. Remember, you have to have focused attention in order to move that information into short-term memory and work on that good deep encoding. You also need to sleep on it. As we learned in Chapter 5, Variations in Consciousness, sleep is critical for memory consolidation. So you've got to allow some breaks and some sleep. We also need to do deep processing. So you have to do that semantic deep processing. Now it turns out that if you handwrite your notes versus typing them, you do deeper, more semantic encoding. That's because as a typer, I can turn myself into basically a stenographer where I'm just retyping what I'm hearing or reading off of a page without doing any encoding. When you handwrite your notes, it's a little bit more of an effortful process, which means that we typically decide what is really important to write down, and we get the core of the idea, and it's a meaningful idea, and we often write it in words that are our own words. So you want to make sure you have personal meaning in your notes with examples, and that you organize those notes to help make sure the information is embedded meaningfully and accurately in the semantic network. That's going to aid in retrieval. Of course, enriching the encoding, so using examples, using visual imagery. There are all kinds of little verbal techniques that you can use. Use mnemonic devices. Those don't work for everything, but every once in a while you come across something in your college level classes that you can put into an acronym that makes sense. Finally, you need to make sure you engage in adequate rehearsal. So we talked previously that the best way to study, once you've formed those memory codes with great deep enriched coding, is retrieval. So you want to quiz yourself. And what we find is that it takes at least 3 successful retrievals of a memory before you have formed a stable, strong memory code. And so sometimes what students will do when they quiz themselves is if they get a question done correctly, they'll kind of move that question and that topic off to the, oh, I already know that pile. Well, it turns out you have to get that question correct at least 3 times before you can move it over. That's something that we sometimes call overlearning. You have to learn it 3 times over to form the strongest, most durable memory code. That concludes Chapter 7, Human Memory.